he emailed me initially and said that he had a student in his class and that I should take a look at the script. And I think maybe I had met Khalid another time as well, but people were telling me about him and he was somebody that I should meet. And my thing is, I've made 30 feature films, over little over 30 feature films, and 98% of those movies have been with first time filmmakers or second time filmmakers. And it's always been, sort of served my mission statement to try to give filmmakers an opportunity, and I read the script, I liked it. And I went out and I put half of my money into making it, and went and raised the other piece of the financing, and we made it.
Sorry, I love that that mission of like being so focused on first time directors. I think obviously there's the financial risk component of jumping in on something like that and making that a focus. I'm curious, kind of, what are some of the things that you really prioritize in order to take that leap on someone?
It all starts, on the page, and fortunately, it's worked out for me. I was a producer on Sam Levinson's first movie, Another Happy Day, that went to Sundance, and obviously now the career that he has with Euphoria, and he just sold a $30 million movie to Netflix. I've all, I feel like, looking at like early Miramax and Corman and and I've always been, sort of like, I came up in the 90s and 80s and looking at like all those Miramax movies that were made at like tiny budgets, from The Clerks to the Sex, Lies, and Videotape, to The Swingers and Chasing Amy. And I try to look for things that we can make for a price. And I think I just, it's got to be on the page first and foremost. And I spend a lot of time talking with filmmakers about their influences in film. Khalid and I probably talk movies the first time for a few hours, and I've always done that. Whether it's produced an early movie for Matthew Cherry, who won an Oscar this year for Hair Love. Justin Cho, who I did Gook with, and I just, again, it's just my mission statement in terms of wanting to be someone who, I think that is, directly tied to your legacy, right? Like, we have to open the door and, help people and give people opportunities to tell their stories. And hopefully Khalid, goes on to have a successful career.
So Khalid, as a first-time director there, I think there's a few different components that struck me. I mean, one immediately was the casting you got within this film. But also, like, I think I actually want to start with you though, and your experience as a first-time director, and like, so you get the funding for this film, and kind of like what your immediate priority became of like, okay, this is happening, I have this script, like, what are you immediately focused on first?
Just pretty much, hit the ground running, and everything was just happening like so fast. It's like, it kind of was like filmmaking boot camp for me, and it's like, Datari and I had to also meet with the potential cast members. I wound up being part of the cast, and I had to, convince them that me as a first-time director, that they were in good hands. And it was kind of similar to when I would talk to, potential customers on the phone. I had to convince them that they were in good hands. It's so funny because, it's like God really has a sense of humor, because, I always tell people my high school mascot was a Trojan, and now I'm the Trojan again. And when I was a telemarketer, I was selling entertainment, and I'm doing the same thing now. So it's like I've come full circle.
Can you kind of unpack a little more about what the pitch was, what the conversation was with some of that talent that you brought in?
Well, with Lamorne, another reason why I wanted to do this film is because when you think of like these comedies, even for the big screen, usually they don't, the plot doesn't revolve around a person of color. And so that was a big selling point for Lamorne and his reps, because not only does the plot revolve around him, a person of color, if you notice, he's literally in every single scene of the film.
Yeah.
And once I conveyed that to them, he was on board.
Did that help some of the dominoes fall to get like Jackie Earle Haley and Haley Joel Osment and those two as well? Was that kind of part of the domino effect?
For me,
Yeah.
I'll say this, as a producer, I'm very, I'm a creative producer. So, I was very hands-on with the cast, and, obviously when I made a lot of movies. And so, I have great relationships with reps. I knew Lamorne. I've known him for many, many years. And, we talked about working together. And so, many times. And so again, I think part of the thing is when you are making a movie with a first-time filmmaker, it's one of those things, right? Like it could turn out. I always tell people, like, the hardest thing to do is make movies for no money, because if you have 1 or 2 bad days, you may not finish the movie. It's not one of those things where you can just throw money at when you get in trouble. And so we talked a lot about what Khalid had to say to these actors, when he was in front of them, because, having, again, I was very hands-on to reaching out to a lot of these people directly and talking to reps and ensuring that, they were in good hands. And then Khalid had to come in and, walk them through the vision of his movie, of the story that he wanted to tell. But in terms of, the production of it, letting them know that it was going to be buttoned up and that they were in good hands, and, everything else they wouldn't have to worry about.
We seem to have lost Khalid. I don't know what happened there. I'm just checking really quick to see if he's in the attendees group, and I'm gonna add him if he is. Interesting.
There he is.
Oh, there you are. I think you're still muted there. Well,
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah.
That's cool. Did you want to, I don't know how much of it you heard, did you want to elaborate kind of on Datari's answer to that at all?
Just with the cast?
Yeah, a bit.
Well, the big thing for me once I did, was just learning how to work with such successful actors, had some of which, have been acting longer than I've been living, and oftentimes I would come into a scene and think that it should go a specific way. And I learned to just trust the actors and have that dialogue with them, because sometimes, what they bring to the table is actually maybe even better than what I had in mind. Ultimately I have the final decision as director, but I learned to have that type of rapport with the actors, which is really important.
And, one of the things you had also mentioned, like part of the appeal of getting Lamorne in there was that he's in every scene. And yes. I think that also relates to, and it's kind of like, Datari, what you were talking about, of having limitations in terms of, like, you can't just throw money at a problem. There's this limited scope. One of the things that you manage really well in this film is, I think partially because of the star power, partially because of the plot, it feels big, but it's really contained. It almost entirely takes place just in this one telemarketing room. So
Yeah.
I guess the first question is like, is that actually what the original script was, or was that an adjustment made for budgeting reasons too?
No, that was actually the original script, and where I got that idea to make it so contained actually goes back to Datari, because I was playing a short at the Bahamas International Film Festival, and a film that he produced was playing in the feature section and was called Nine Rides, and directed by Matthew Cherry, and it was really good film. 90% of it took out of an Uber car. And it was shot on an iPhone. And I thought this was so dope. I was like, wow, they made a whole movie out of this, and it was so entertaining. And I was like, you know what, I should do something like this. And the only world that I really knew, was a telemarketing world before. And so I always had that idea to make it contained ever since, I saw that film.
And Datari, is that something that you look for in scripts too? Is it's like, how manageable is this scope for kind of what the story is?
For sure, especially when I'm working with, especially making movies with first-time filmmakers, if we're making them independently, and because I come from the school, I come from a school of thought that whether you're making a movie, for less than $1 million or $100 million, I mean, you still can make a incredible film, for with limited resources. I think about, Fruitvale Station was made under $1 million. I think about Ava DuVernay's movie Middle of Nowhere was made for $250,000. Stephen Capel's movie The Land was made, I think, for $600,000. I mean, there's been so many great movies that have been made on tiny budgets where the filmmakers have went on to, I think Capel's next movie, his third movie, is he's directing the Transformers, and so I think that, it's one of those things. I think if you can make a tiny movie great, then like you can, when you have all of the resources, that's the hardest thing to do, is to make something, like I said, tiny. But I do look for stories. Obviously, it starts on the page, and I've actively sought out kids coming out of the film program at USC, and and other film programs and the labs at Sundance, and but Khalid is one thing I will say that I really love about him is his tenacity in terms of, like, he really chased me down. It was he had the right people reaching out to me, and he was very persistent with me. And I think in our business, it's a tough business, and you can be talented, but you can get discouraged sometime too. And because it is show business. And if you don't go after things relentlessly, sometime, they may not happen. So I give him a lot of credit for, staying persistent, that I should be the person to make his movie.
I always tell people, me being from Chicago, my blood type is H for hustle. So I think he admired that in me.
I'm sure that background in telemarketing doesn't hurt either.
Sometimes it was too much. I would be like, dude, stop. I'm going to make your movie. Relax.
I was a little eager.
Datari, you mentioned among the list, I was happy to hear so many USC alum that you threw out there, Cable and Kugler and all those guys. And I mentioned earlier, Khalid, there's that list of all those different USC folks who are in the special thanks, and I think I saw a couple in the credits too.
Mm-hmm.
So Datari, it sounds like you also have some of that USC connection of folks you've worked with a few times from USC. But Khalid, I'd love to hear just kind of how you relied, especially because you were sort of balancing both of finishing your thesis, your MFA, when like going into this project, just kind of how you utilize that network and those resources in a way to kind of help get this film get made.
Well, yeah, some of the people, that I brought on, that was on my short film Night Diner, I wound up bringing on to the feature. And it was crazy just, right after last fall also, I won the Student DGA Award, which was pretty cool for Night Diner. But that's a really different film. But that one's also contained too.
Well, can you talk a bit more about the difference between those two and kind of what you brought from one to the other?
Well, that one, Night Diner, is kind of an allegory about the exploitation of African American men. It's kind of a dark film about this young black yelper who gets more than he bargains for when he crashes a 5-star diner after hours in a town he's not familiar with. So I guess in that sense, there is kind of, where these characters of color are kind of stepping into this forbidden zone. We see a little bit of that in Death of a Telemarketer, when he opens up the, file cabinet, which is kind of like the forbidden fruit of call centers, do not call lists. And a funny thing about that is, when I was a telemarketer, we learned this is a thing you do not call, but of course some people call it. And we would realize that, when you, do talk to someone, like, let's say the person that put the household on the do not call list was the wife, but when you call, you get the husband who doesn't know anything about it, or vice versa.
Yeah. And
so, and then, you may call someone that is like Asa to show up with a 44 at your, the call center too. So it's a Pandora's box.
You mentioned sort of the idea of taking, you mentioned the idea of race and sort of being the fish out of the water and sort of that element of it. It was interesting. So I couldn't help myself but the two films are nothing alike. But I thought of Sorry to Bother You at one point, just immediately upon seeing this film. Mm-hmm. I apologize for even bringing it up because I'm sure there's a part of you that saw that film and was like, oh crap, that's my idea. But go ahead, you can respond to that part first.
Yeah, well, that one obviously was different. It kind of veered into science fiction territory. But with me, one thing I learned, especially at USC, first of all, everything is done under the sun.
Yeah.
Everything, and it was actually a good thing, I thought, even though the stories are completely different. That one, revolved around a Black telemarketer. And because that one did well, it was kind of, people could kind of see, where mine would wind up. So
the question though that I was kind of getting to with it is that film is such an intense satire of both racial structures in America and even more so class. It is designed
capitalism.
Really, it's a really, really kind of profound critique of capitalism, but there's the racial component. And I thought it was interesting, actually, and this is nothing to do with the comparison with this, that's like a side note. It's just more since you mentioned this idea of how you explored race in your previous short and then kind of how it appears here. I would like to kind of hear a little bit more of your thoughts, because for the most part, it almost reads as I hate using the term, as a race neutral film in some way. It's not explicitly exploring racism in any clear way. It's not like the race of the character could be swapped out in some sense and it wouldn't, so I'm just curious kind of how you played with those ideas.
Yeah, well, if you notice in this film, it's never mentioned at all, anything about race. And really, I just didn't think that it was necessary. My whole thing was I wanted to normalize African Americans in workplace comedies and not make it a big thing, and so that was intentional.
Yeah, a movie is really about your moral compass, I think, in a lot of ways. I watch a lot of movies. I think what really drew me to the script too was it sort of had, it kind of reminded me of this movie Phone Booth, this Colin Farrell movie. I mean, they're different movies, but just in terms of we're morally, sometimes, we're in a capitalist society. And as you said, and I think sometimes we get caught up in by any means necessary, as long as I win, right? But, at the end of the day, integrity is important, and winning the right way is important. And there's too many people that, again, don't think about the integrity piece of it and just say anything and do anything to try to get to the finish line. And I think that struck a chord with me. That really struck a chord with me.
Sorry, either of you could kind of expand on that, but as you're talking about that, there is this parallel to actually how the film industry functions that I'm seeing. Obviously it is a very capitalist, it is a capitalist driven industry, but there is that sense of like, how do you navigate that sort of hyper capitalism with some sense of a moral compass, of some sort of a moral grounding? And I just love for either of you to kind of expand on that concept, since you kind of bring it up there.
Datari, I think you could.
I've been making movies for a long time, and I've had a lot of opportunities to, now, recently, I partnered with Jamie Foxx, and we have a big overall deal at Sony, and I'm on a set. We start shooting with another USC kid, Earle Taylor. I'm making this movie, They Clone Tyrone, right now. We go to camera in 3 weeks. But I would say, like, I stayed independently up until recently on purpose. I had many opportunities to do overall, first look deal at a studio. And, I saw some of my friends that would make these deals, and, they would develop, you would see them, it's a little bit like a smoke screen, right? Like you read the trades and you see all these announcements coming out, but, half of those movies don't get made. Like they never get made. So like you can do an overall at a studio, and you can have an announcement every month. But what I saw happening with a lot of my friends was that they would do these deals and they would develop all these things and have all these announcements, but they wouldn't get anything made, because I think a lot of times executives, it's different than it was in the 70s, and in the 60s, when, executives were real, like, film auteurs, and like they really care about cinema. Now a lot of the executives come out of business school. They come out of Wharton and Kellogg, and so a lot of times they operate from a place of fear, and they would rather not make a movie. They would rather develop it, develop stuff forever, because if they make it and it doesn't work, then they don't get to go home to their house with the koi pond in the backyard, right? And so I think, like, for me, making movies independently and making them at a price, knowing the marketplace, knowing it just allowed me to take a lot of swings. You know what I mean? Like, I got to make a lot of different kind of movies. I'm interested in so many things. I try to watch everything, and that kept me from, like, I would say, like, doing things that, like, or making things that I didn't believe in, just because I needed something to work, or it had to fit a P&L sheet for a studio to make a certain amount of money. I just was able to take a lot of swings again and make a lot of different kind of things, and see what worked, see what didn't work. But all of the movies, my investors got their financing back, which is why I was able to keep making more movies, and so I kind of never got caught up in that. I think Hollywood can be a little bit like high school, in a sense of, like, everybody's trying to be the popular kid. And, for me, like, I never really got caught up in that thing. I just wanted to keep making stuff, and because I, knowing the history of how this town was built, why it was built, how it was built, and that no one really, some of my favorite filmmakers, some of them died depressed. They didn't really get the flowers until afterwards anyway, right? Until people looked at the body of work, you know, the Cassavetes and the Hitchcocks and a lot of these guys, when they were making the movies, they didn't really, you know, I mean, that's a whole nother conversation. But yeah, I just never get caught up in that stuff. You know, I know if I make a movie at a certain price, you know, and, you know, we get certain names in the movie. But again, we always try to break somebody, always, you know, but I always know that like I can make movies on my own terms if I make them independently and keep them at a certain price.
Yeah, it's a really, I appreciate kind of how reflective that answer was and its scope. One of the things that kind of struck me in it too was you've made this conscious decision to kind of stay out of the scramble of the, you know, the big studio game. You know, you want to kind of have autonomy over your decisions and stuff, and yet you've been attracted to a big diversity of projects. So the question that struck me was kind of, when reflecting back on it, of that thing that ties it together. I asked a different version of it in terms of like what brought you to Khalid's film, for example, and what specifically, but it's more, I think I want to hear you unpack a bit more of like, what's the through line of kind of all those projects for you, of like the thing where you reflect back on, you're like, no, this is actually kind of this defining aspect of like what brought this sort of, what makes it mine in some way, you know, because you kind of brought up the idea of legacy. And I don't know why, it just struck me as like, that's such an interesting way to kind of reflect on, especially when you're staying in this indie game where you have a different director kind of rotating out on each project and stuff. So I don't know, I'm just curious to hear you kind of reflect on that.
Well, it's interesting. Like I think about, and this is, I may be a little all over the place with the answer, but I think about like when I, you know, growing up, like I think Jerry Bruckheimer is the greatest producer that ever lived. Like he's in that conversation. But then you also have guys like Ray Stark, who had the vision to like start the Peter Stark program and name it after his son. Or you had guys like Sam Spiegel, who's the only producer with 3 Best Picture Oscars, and he was the only producer on all 3 of those movies, On the Waterfront, Lawrence of Arabia, African Queen. You know, like, you know, there's, you know, I've just always been a historian of our business. And I think when you know the business and you're a historian of it, and I just think that like you don't really get caught up in that rat race. I mean, I think about the 70s, and I think about like, when you look at that, that's probably the greatest group of filmmakers, you know, like of all time, like all in this at the same time. When you think about like Coppola and Scorsese and Lucas and, you know, De Palma and Spielberg. But there was another guy who was running around making movies with his wife, John Cassavetes, you know, too, who was making Faces and Killing of the Chinese Bookie and Gloria. And I mean, he's going to the Hall of Fame too, you know? So like, I just think that like, I never got caught up in having to like, you know, I think sometimes people have a definition of what they think success looks like. So it's like, again, it's like going to high school and this is the prom king and this is the prom queen. And, you know, we should be like this because this is the guy who has all the girls, and we should be like this because this is the girl who has all the guys. But at the end of the day, like, you just got to run your own race, you know? And I think if you love movies, I think the one thing that I'm proud of the most is that a lot of the filmmakers that I got behind went on to have real careers, and a lot of the talent that I discovered, you know, I was in the ABC Disney program in 2004 with Meghan Markle, and I put Meghan Markle in one of her first movies, and I put, you know, Ryan Destiny in her first movie, who's having a really great career, and Michael Rainey Jr. we discovered on the movie Love, which Sheldon Candace directed, who also was a USC kid. You know, you know, I think when you can say that you basically, you know, was able to create opportunities for people and they went on to have your career, your legacy is tied to that just as much as it is, you know, making. I always felt like John Singleton, why he was so iconic was because when you look at all of the actors that are in Boys in the Hood, where they are today. Regina King's got an Oscar. Cuba Gooding Jr.'s got an Oscar. Ice Cube is still a movie star. Like Morris Chestnut is still working. Nia Long is still a star. Like everybody in that movie is still relevant. Angela Bassett is the Queen of Wakanda. Like, you know, your legacy is not just tied to the actual movie that you made, it's tied to what those people go on to be, you know? And so, you know, again, knowing that, it was just always important for me to take a lot of swings. You know, I can't, you know, make one movie every 8 years or 5 years, or, you know, I need to take a lot of swings, you know, and I don't need to, you don't have to, you can go to the Hall of Fame getting base hits.
I'm reminded of, as you're talking about that, like the coaching trees they talk about in football, where, you know, you have like just how that expansive tree of people that got brought in under one person.
Parcells, Belichick worked under Parcells,
Exactly.
you know, and got 2 Super Bowls as the defensive coordinator for the Giants. I mean,
and for a long time, I feel like Andy Reid's legacy was actually the people who came under him, and it's this huge tree. And then, you know,
yeah.
So we have a lot of great questions about the production itself I want to get to. Before we do, Khalid, I want to hear the inverse of that question. Since you're at the beginning point, and we're talking about like kind of the legacy that you're, and I feel like this is an amazing start of like, you're a year out of film school and you got your first feature done, like with a guy who has a pretty good track record of making it happen. And I just kind of would love to hear you kind of respond on the flip side of that, of like the vision of kind of how you want to ground yourself moving forward with this.
Well, you know, it was a blessing for me to attend the #1 film school in the world. And like, as I said before, you know, this is the only place I applied to. When I first got out here, you know, I had met a mutual filmmaker friend who was African-American, who was going to USC at the time, and I wasn't trying to go back to, you know, grad school. I was done, and invited me on his short film that he was doing with his other classmates. And this was the first time I saw like young African-American men who looked like me actually running a film set. And one of his classmates was Ryan Coogler. And I met him there, and, you know, we kind of lost contact, but then, you know, it was this film, you know, right when I joined SAG, because I told you I was an actor, you know, they gave us a screener for this film called Fruitvale. It was called Fruitvale there, not Fruitvale Station, but yeah, and I saw it, it just blew me away. And I just saw from where he started, and I saw where he ended, and I said, you know what, I want that for myself. You know, I want to tell stories, you know, like he did, and be successful and leave a legacy of my own. And so I was really inspired by that, and I hope to inspire other, you know, filmmakers that come behind me.
So we have a few questions coming in. I want to be able to get to as many of them as possible. The first one I have here in the comments is from Ran Lee, who's an MFA in production. I'm going to promote them to panelists. And how we do this is basically, Ran, I'm promoting you now. You have the option of you should unmute your mic and ask the question yourself. And if you want, you can unmute your video as well, so that we can sort of have a real Q&A here. I see you have joined. We're not hearing or seeing you. Ryan, are you there?
Oh, let's see.
It's odd. It says it's unmuted. But...
Technology for you. There he is.
Yeah.
Hi. Thank you, Matthew. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Mr. Nice to meet you. Khalid. I'm so happy for you. Congratulations. Yeah, I enjoyed
the same cohort.
Yeah, so I'm really happy for you. I still remember the short version you showed in the class. So happy. I enjoyed the film, and you have a great cast. So my question for you is like, how many days did you shoot, and what is like the biggest lesson you have, you learned in this, like your first feature?
That's a good question. We shot this in what, 11 days?
Okay.
Yeah, 11 days. It was really, really tough. It was like 508 times 10. So I learned, first of all, you need a lot of sleep.
Right.
As much as you can, because even, and sometimes after, you're going to even spend time talking to the cast about, the shots for tomorrow. And, it's great also, just in case anything goes wrong or delay, it's always good to have a backup plan for the scenes that you plan to shoot. That was a big thing that was really helpful for us.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
So did you have any time like doing rehearsal with the cast?
We did have some rehearsal, but mostly it was to, we would talk about it over the phone and how, they were going to approach the scene. And sometime during some downtimes, we would talk about the scene also. One of the things I learned, we also made adjustments to the script as we were shooting. And what I would like to do is sometimes I would just be off in the cut and I would just observe how the actors, the chemistry they had in between takes. And I remember it was one early on in the film where it was supposed to only be two of the actors, a Lamorne and another person. And I was like, wait a minute, we should give some lines to David as well. And because they had so much chemistry, and I paid attention to that and it really worked. Right. So yeah, it's also, you'll get those organic moments, just look out for them.
Got it. Nice. Thank you so much, man. And it makes it extra special because today is my birthday. So
happy birthday, man.
Yeah, thanks.
Happy birthday.
I'm happy to watch your first feature film on my birthday. Congratulations again.
Oh, thanks, man. We got to catch up.
For sure. Yeah, I'm now in China, but I'll be back maybe next May. So for sure, we're gonna hang out. Okay, take care.
All right, for sure, man. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rad. Happy birthday to you. All right, I am going to I see Raj here. Raj Vora has a hand up. So I'm going to let them go ahead and ask their question. Go to panelist. And then Melanie, I see you. We're gonna get to you next.
Oh, real.
Hello. Congratulations and thank you, Matthew, for taking my call and showing the film. And really, the Khalid and very first feature film is really exciting and all. And Datari, your approach is so good. And really, it makes a sense for making film. You also won the John Singleton Award, am I right? And the
no, actually, we won the ABFF Fan Favorite Award.
Right, that's a very good. And I was just curious how you guys met Sujata Day, because I know her from other HBO, some of those things and all.
Datari, you could take that one.
He said, how did we meet?
Sujata Day.
Oh yeah, no, I met Sujata.
She's a good actress too.
Yeah, she's great. I helped her, and personally invested in her movie Definition Please. I was a producer on it, and I always, I think she's talented. We met, I think maybe 4 years ago or something like that at Sundance, and we stayed in contact. Our business is, artists, it's a small community,
right?
So we stayed in contact. When she was putting her movie together, I came and helped and got involved. And, we need more women filmmakers, of course, and more, filmmakers of color, Indian, Latin, Black, everybody. So, but she's great. So she had just wrapped her movie, and I asked her to come play with us a little bit too on this film. So, I'm really hands-on with the casting, and I really, try to
When you mentioned the Black African American movie and all, yesterday I just saw the Small Axe by Amazon, and it's a very nice mangrove movie at the Los Angeles here in Drive-In, and that's the same. A lot of very nice movies, and all the African American stories should be told. I'm so proud, and I enjoyed the film.
Oh, thank you, man. Thank you for watching.
Thank you, and congratulations once again. Go Trojan.
Cool.
Raj. So we're gonna go to Melanie Orpin next, who is a MFA production alum. Promoting you now. And go ahead, Melanie. You can unmute your mic and video if you want.
Hi, Khalid.
Hey, what's up, Mel? How you doing?
Hey, what's up? Nice to meet you, Datari. Hey, Matt.
Nice to meet you.
I just wanted to congratulate you, Khalid. I'm so thrilled. I love the movie. You guys did such a great job. It was so fantastic. I'm so thrilled for you. I remember being in the labs and talking to you about this movie, and I remember being so excited and I couldn't wait to see it. So it's just so thrilling to see it. So first and foremost, kudos to you and the whole squad for like making it happen. I'm even more inspired than I already am with you because you're so amazing.
Thank you.
But I wanted to hear a little bit more about your journey, if you could. Thank you so much for telling us how you sort of started to get it made. But since it's a first feature, I'm so curious to hear from both of you. Like, how did you, so you made the film, and then how did you go about, what was the process like for you to go from making the film and securing distribution? Did it happen before the festival circuit? Was it while you were on the festival circuit? Like, what were the steps you went through, and what can we learn from you as we're taking our projects out?
Well, I'll answer that question. The film, we don't have distribution in place yet. We are, we have a lot of, buyers raising their hand. But the film has just been playing at festivals for the last few months, like Austin and ABFF and so forth. And, we obviously, since Khalid is a USC alum, he wanted to show it to you guys, but we don't have our deal currently in place, but we have a lot of buyers raising their hands. So, it'll be, we'll do an announcement when that is finalized.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, yeah, so that's wonderful. I'm still so excited because I've been reading about you guys in the trades and hearing all the good news and the word at Austin. So just keep kicking ass, and I know it's gonna happen. And I can't wait to hear when it is. And keep letting us know how we can support you.
Will do. I appreciate that.
Good to see you.
All right, good to see you too, Mel.
Thanks so much, Mel. Yeah, real quick, I do want to kind of talk a little bit more about, Datari, you probably have a real sense of this, is how COVID has affected distribution sort of deals for you in any way. I assume there's some impact. I know like this was not one where it affected, like you had a distribution plan and it changed, so you can't answer directly to this film, but has there stuff you've noticed with other projects compared to this one that has how the industry sort of shifted?
It's been tricky. I mean, in a sense that like, I had a movie that premiered at Sundance this year, 9 Days, by another, USC alum, Edson Oda. We did our deal like with Sony Classics right after Sundance. I did have a movie get released during the pandemic, which was a Netflix movie I produced for Netflix called Uncorked, with another first-time filmmaker that went to USC, Prentice Penny, who show runs Insecure. Yeah. Listen, everywhere I go is USC.
If you're making a case for
Mafia,
I'll put in a word for you. Like,
there's no escaping. No, but I would say the way it affected me, I think in the beginning was that, Prentice and Netflix, we had this big marketing campaign that we were putting around Uncorked. And I'm just speaking in general, the movie, we were going to premiere it at South by Southwest. Obviously that went away because of the pandemic. But I think, the movie open #1 on Netflix. But I think having everyone at home and, you know, watching content in some ways probably helped it, you know, like, you know, content is key. You know, we haven't had to, you know, outside of those 2 movies, 9 Days and Court, I haven't had to, you know, put anything else out or go try to find distribution for a movie. We, you know, I was so confident in this movie with the cast that we have. You know, a lot of them have great wind behind them. Lamorne's on a big show called Woke on Hulu, and Alisha Wainwright is on Raising Dion with Michael B. Jordan. You know, everyone in the cast is, you know, Woody McClain is on the Power spinoff. Like, they're all on shows. They're all working. Matt, you know, Gil Azari's on Black AF on Netflix, and McGorry was rapping How to Get Away with Murder. So I think we made it for a price that I was always confident. Like, I know the marketplace when it comes to buyers and distributors. So, like, you know, I think a lot, the piece of advice I would give to producers trying to make movies is like, never, I look at movies almost like, if somebody gave you $5 million, would you spend that on one movie? Or if somebody gave you $5 million, would you invest that $5 million into one stock, or would you get a mutual fund with 8 different stocks? And, you know, I've seen producers like be able to raise a little bit of money and overspend on making a movie because their you know, plan is that their movie's going to get into Sundance and they're going to get a big sale. But you have to think about, what if the movie doesn't get into any festivals? How are you going to pay these investors back? And you can't overspend. And, you know, that's another place that Khalid and I, you know, me being someone who's done this for a long time, I had to say no a lot. You know, I got him the cast, you know, because the cast I knew would cover the spend on the movie, but I had to say no a lot, you know, because I can't overspend on a movie. You know, I'm not going to sacrifice the integrity of it, but I think sometimes people get lax with that, and then they end up in a situation where the advance that they get from a distributor, if they don't get into a major festival, doesn't cover the budget. And that's the reason why you see, you know, the independent game and the studio game is the exact same thing, right? Like, if you make a movie for a studio and the movie doesn't, you know, recoup the budget plus P&A, you know, they're going to put you in director's jail. You may not get a chance to make another movie for a while. And if you make a movie independently and your investors are not getting their money back, it's going to be harder for you to raise money for the next movie. So you can always tell the guys that people are actually making money with them because they keep getting to make movies, you know, whether that's independent or on a studio level. So I would just say, like, you know, I always get people that give me a script, and I like to ask a question like, what's the budget? They come to me to make the movie and they'll say like 3 million, and I'll be like, where did that number come from? How do you, because you just, like, the cast has to dictate what the budget is, you know what I mean? Like, on a certain level, you know, it does. Like, you know, you have to know as a producer that you're going to be able to cover that. Like, worst case scenario, I can license this movie, or I can, like, you know, take it to a streamer. And to answer your question, I think what happened was a bottleneck when the pandemic hit, because all of the big studios that couldn't release movies theatrical all tried to lay their movies off to streamers. And what happened to Netflix over the last 6 months is they became worth more than Disney. Their stock like tripled. And, you know, they sort of had, all of the streamers had their pick of the litter of like all of these $100 million movies to pick up from studios. So anybody that had like a small movie, you kind of like needed that to, you know, like, it might not have been the time to like go to the streamers unless you were gonna, you know, be premiering at Venice or still be premiering at a big festival. But ultimately, the longer this pandemic goes, content is still going to be king, and they're going to still have to, Netflix, I think going into this year had a target to make close to 100 movies in 1 year. And so obviously that didn't happen, and so they still are going to have to, I think next year is going to be a time where it's, you're going to have, a lot of people raising their hand to pick up movies.
I think also what you sort of touched on there too was your style of producing is much more versatile and well equipped to handle this kind of a crisis of industry. And I think actually what we might see is more studios try to shift a little bit closer to your model, because there's this recognition of like, if you dump $100 million into a film, that's a lot of eggs to put in one basket. And if something comes up where you can't get theatrical distribution, I mean, they obviously have deals in place where normally that works, and this is unprecedented in some regard, but it's not unprecedented to have a flop at the box office where for whatever reason, people just don't see it. So it is interesting to kind of think about how this pandemic maybe has reshaped the way we think about that financial model. And maybe yours kind of becomes closer to what the ideal model is of, spread it out and that way, like, you're never too reliant on just one thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think like what I've been doing over the last 6 months is trying to find things that, obviously we have a deal with Sony and we got a pretty, decent slate of projects that we're doing over the next year. But I think like trying to find things that are contained too, that, we can get behind, that like, I think Sam did that well with the John David Washington Zendaya movie. That's like a really contained love story, sort of like a two-hander. And Netflix came in and bought it for $30 million, and I mean, I'm sure he probably made it for, So I just think like contained is the way to go if you're going to make something independently right now, because like there are a lot of big studio movies that are starting to shoot. I know they're shooting Batman right now, right after we finish this Netflix movie. Jamie is doing Spider-Man, so there are the big movies that are, getting shot, but they can afford all the COVID costs. They can afford an additional $10 million for all the COVID precautions and everything. If you're going to make something independent, you got to keep it. I mean, I would just suggest that you keep it like find things that you can shoot in 1 or 2 locations that are contained.
Yeah. We're kind of nearing the end of time here. Mark Vincent, who's an MFA production alum, his question's kind of already answered, but since he's a fellow alum, I want to give him a chance to come up and speak and say hello. So I'm going to throw in a panelist really quick. Oops. And Mark, you're there. You just gotta. Oh, I see. I'm gonna ask you to unmute, and you're welcome to turn on your video as well if you want. There we go. Now I see you. I don't hear you though.
Yeah, I don't see him. Is he there? Guess not.
Can you talk? No, I see you're talking, but we do not hear you. Well, I guess don't know what to do. Yeah, I
He
can
could type it, and then you can say
yeah,
the question.
if you wanna type it into the question box, I mean, I can read for you. What you had written was, what was the length of time for production from script to completion?
Well, the script I started writing my last year of school, and as I said before, even during the shoot, after talking to the actors, I was still making adjustments and stuff to it. So it wasn't just everything, it was just locked and we just went from that, It was always like a work in progress. So.
Unfortunately, Mark, we still can't hear you, but I appreciate being able to see you and for your question. Thank you for being here. We're gonna move you back to attendee. All right. Well, I think that's all we have in the audience. Khalid, is there any upcoming stuff that you can kind of share with us that you have lined up right now?
Not really. There's a few things I'm working on. Another thing I learned from Datari is, not to put certain things out in the universe before they're ready.
Yeah.
But I will be sharing that soon. And I want to say shout out to my manager, Joe. I think he's I think he's watching.
Yeah. Well, whenever you are ready to share that next project, you let us know because we'd love to screen it again. It was really great being able to talk to you tonight.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Always happy to support, talented filmmakers like Khalid.
Yeah, Datari, I feel like the dean owes you a thank you letter for giving so many of our students jobs out of college. I'll be sure to tell her.
I appreciate it. Great. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, it was all my pleasure. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Barnett, wherever you are.
All right, take care, all.
All right, take care.